Hello, welcome everyone. We see a lot of people have joined via the chat. We're really excited today to talk with our CHRO Playbook topic around HR GameChangers, episode 18. And so while we're waiting for everyone to join, feel free to drop your name and your location into the chat where you're dialing in from. And we've got a really exciting panel. For those of you who have never joined us before, welcome. For those of you who are return visitors, as you well know, this is a multi-themed, multi-episode series, and it's our 18th episode. So we're legal now. We just turned 18, and we'll explore how CHROs scale AI responsibly, protect culture, build trust, and preserve human-driven performance. If anyone has any friends or colleagues or people who might get a lot out of this topic, I'll go ahead and drop future registration links into the chat so they can join us. Additionally, for everyone who is with us live today, if you have a question for one of these three amazing panelists, feel free to drop it directly into the chat or into the questions link. I'll be moderating that and we'll make sure to get to those. And feel free to do that throughout. So without further ado, let's meet who we have here. So hello, everyone. I'm Janelle Henry. I am your moderator today. I work at Stripe. And prior to that, I was at a small startup called Red AI that was a customer of GoProfiles. So I've been a big fan of their product, their ability to really connect and build support and engagement and growth. And so just really happy to be here on behalf of them. And today's conversation is an exciting one that I'm really quite passionate about, and I know these speakers are too. We're going to be talking about the CHRO Playbook. How do you protect culture while scaling AI? And how can we do that responsibly to drive performance and really stay abreast of all of the changes that are happening within our industry? So without further ado, let's meet who we have on our panel. And so for today's get to know you question, let's take it back because we always like talking about first jobs, but I think we've got a few repeat panelists here. So instead of your first job, why don't you share with the group, what did you want to be when you were 10 years old? And does it have any direct correlation to what you do now? Allison, I'm going to hand it over to you first.
Sure. Hi, my name is Allison Carr. I actually, until last week, was at Cybereason. We were just recently acquired by a larger cybersecurity company. And when I was 10 years old, I was convinced I was going to be a medical doctor and actually went to school for medicine. And it wasn't until my junior year that I took a human resource management class, discovered that this could be a career, and completely flipped. So I ended up changing my major and minor. So majored in business, general management, and minored in biology. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, maybe sometimes you really are saving lives out there too. You just don't know it. Well, it's fantastic to have you. Thanks for joining us today. Up next, Jim. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Lovely to see you too. When I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a chef. My grandparents had run the village pub, and I used to help my grandmother with the cooking when I was a lot younger. So I've kind of grown up cooking, and I still do it today. We've just added our 5th addition to our family. A new son was born in January, so I do all the cooking for the family. Thank you. Five kids at home. I do all the cooking every evening, and so yeah, I still get to cook and attempt to create something that they will all be interested in eating.
Great. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing beyond being a chef.
Well, I lead the people function for Ashby, and to me, it is a dream job, one that I've discovered later in life. I've been at the intersection of TA technology and people and process for the last 15 years or so. I helped design Google's in-house ATS back in 2011, and that's taken me on this journey to be here at Ashby, part of the people technology platform and leading the people function. So I get to play many roles, wear many hats here.
That's fantastic. And congratulations on the new addition. I'm sure you're tweaking your recipes as we speak, right? To continue to feed five little ones. That's fantastic. And last, Vanessa, it's great to have you here today joining us.
Thanks, great to be here. So yeah, a little bit about what I wanted to be when I was 10. It's actually quirkily very similar to Alison's story, same but different. I wanted to be an environmental scientist. So you'll see it on my LinkedIn profile as well. I'm a big corporate hippie, looking at how we can change the environment. But in the end, I did biomedical science. And whilst I was going through that, I was like, oh, love science, love neuroscience, love the brain, but I can't see myself stuck in a lab. So I pivoted to psychology. And through that, I found organizational psychology.
Sure.
And then that's kind of what took me on the route to have a bit of a career where I'm at chapters of my career have gone between tech and product and people and culture.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much again for everybody joining. And so let's get into our discussion points. We've got some real meaty ones today that I'm particularly excited to hear this season's group's opinion on. So we'll chat a little bit about governance foundations, practical principles for governing AI adoption without slowing innovation. We'll talk about how we can communicate. How do you build trust and maintain transparency with employees at scale? How can we ensure consistency alignment across leaders as AI reshapes work? Cultural safeguards, which I know all of you as leaders are probably take very, very seriously to preserve human-centered performance drives through change. And metrics, right? Show us the proof. How can you provide clear board-ready metrics that measure cultural health right alongside AI progress? So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my slides here so I can see these lovely panelists' faces. And I've got a few questions to ask. And again, chat, go for it. Also ask away. But my first question is, how can HR leaders introduce AI into their organizations without slowing down innovation?
I'm happy to kick off if you'd like. The first thing I think is it should be a rhythm that your company already has to adopt new systems and products and platforms. So integrating AI adoption into your existing approvals workflows is the fastest way to have everybody used to and comfortable with that process, so that it doesn't matter whether they're adopting a platform that has AI in it or whether it's them subscribing to an AI product. They're probably already used to that process, that way of doing business, so it doesn't feel uncomfortable to them. And it's then not alien to the approvals process and doesn't cause fear everywhere. That would be my first point to help everybody adopt as quickly as possible without causing any thrash.
Great. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I think for me, I always look at like the hidden question in the question is like, how does HR introduce it without slowing things down? And I think the question is, what are you actually trying to achieve through AI in your business? Where do you need to go fast and where do you need to go slow? So for me, what I did in my prior role, which I finished up as the VP of People at an energy scale up in December, and I ended up leading the AI rollout because I knew it was going to be the biggest people and culture change of our lifetime, hands down. And before we went into like the tooling and the process and the training, I just said, whoa, let's just put a group together, steering group, working group, whatever you want to call them, with the people that are closest to this. So it was the CEO and myself. Then we wanted security and IT definitely in there. Some of my people team members were super keen, so I had them. And then because we had head of product, head of engineering, more as kind of drop in, drop out because they had to execute. So the first thing we did, I said, let's just do a kickoff and a pre-mortem. So instead of a post-mortem and the oopsies of what went wrong, let's come together and say, what does good look like?
I love that.
Most people can't answer that question. Not just what are the success metrics, and I know we'll get to the board ready metrics, but I want people to answer in 6 months, in 12 months in our company, what are we seeing that's different? What are we hearing that's different from our customers and our employees? And importantly, what are we feeling? We keep taking out the feeling in this, and where AI adoption is blocked is generally what I'm seeing, fear, resistance, feeling. So as a group, you probably want to map that out first, and then the pre-mortem of where things are going to go wrong. Then you know, for example, what was people were worried about in our pre-mortem in that group was data security, governance, tooling, you know, will people be vibe coding? Are we going to have SOC 2? Like all of that I'm sure we'll get into the juice of it. But for me, once we had that, then we had a map of where we could go fast and slow. Otherwise, it looks like HR or IT are blocking things. And it's like, no, we've actually taken a bird's eye view on this. And then it helps us intentionally do the change management, the communications, and be like, on these parts, folks, go for your life, go as fast as you want. On these parts, please don't put employee relations data or comp and bed into these systems. So for me, like the big takeaway is slow down to speed up and do like a change readiness kickoff with the group, or a in-flight kickoff with the group that will be steering this forward.
That's, I think, really sound logical advice. As we kind of a follow-up question, when you do sort of speed up to slow down, how do you keep employees engaged in feeling that this matters, and then also supported as they're going through what can only be felt as probably tremendous change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, and potentially feeling really unsettled or unsecured that they're essentially working, automating themselves out of a job?
I can share a couple stats in preparation for this, and then granted these stats are probably at this point 60 to 90 days old because this is moving so quickly. But two that stuck out to me were nearly 30% of employees are using AI without telling their manager. So I think that's highlighting that it's not necessarily an AI adoption issue, it's actually a governance issue. And so employees and their managers need to understand kind of what's in, what's out, what is going to be the governance model, because I think people do have this interest and appetite in exploring it. And I've also heard people say, hey, even if I'm not allowed to do it on my company computer, I am trialing this in my personal time, and I'll just plug this in on my personal computer to help me at work. So I think people are interested, and there is interest in adoption. But if the companies have not taken a stance on how they're going to use it, they're going to lose control of some of this. And then secondly, with your question around trust and training, another stat I heard was that nearly 80% of employees are telling their boards and announcing that, yes, we plan to reskill our workforce by 2030, but only about 13% of workers have actually gone through any sort of reskilling. So there's a lot of talk and intention, but I don't think that leadership teams have actually rolled out what is the roadmap to actually reskill. Sure. And what positions and at what level, because it's not going to be the peanut butter spread across the board. So I think there's a lot of conversation about AI, and people are really looking for much more specific information.
Great. A follow-up to that, as we think about frameworks or tools or tracking mechanisms, any recommendations or exploration that you all have taken to be able to organize all of these different tools or make sure that we're using them in the right capacity, I think as Vanessa had mentioned earlier?
I think there's a big difference between the tools that individuals are subscribing to and the tooling that's within the products that you as a company already use and have adopted. And crossing back into the previous question as well, it's the empowerment of the usage of the tools that are within those products that are already in general ubiquitous use across your organization. That's where you can get some really good rhythm with the company, with your employees, getting them using up to speed, leveraging the knowledge bases of those products, the use cases and so on, that then they can apply across to other features within other products, particularly these ones that they can subscribe to as individuals. Then they can bring the business use cases for those back to the company to make proposals about the usage there. And at that point, you can then have them engaged with training other people within their teams who would be interested in that same use case,
Sure.
to then empower and to grow across the board. The critical intention of defining how much time is being saved, because that's your ROI, and you have to be able to repurpose that time. And that way may well be in smaller teams, but it's repurposing future open headcount rather than seeing it as a business risk. That can then be applied through to the reports back up into the business of here's the impact that we're having from the rollout of AI across our business.
I think Yeah, I was nodding along for a lot of that there, Jim. I think for me, like I think the two questions do cross over with each other. I think if we look at, I'll talk with a practical example of a failure I had as a VP of people. When we look at training, there's tooling training and other training. And I think we were so keen to build in-house because I have an L&D background. My senior people partner had an L&D background. And then we had experts. We had someone with a master's degree in AI. Our CEO had a background in computer science. We're like, let's build the training, not like obviously the tooling training. What a lack of return on investment. I would just like, it was painful because a lot of the awesome open source training wasn't all out there back then, like early last year. But I was just like, oh man, we spent so much time and effort. So what I would have done instead, if we're just looking pure tooling, is just now look at all of the free resources out there. I think my favorite are Anthropic's AI fluency model. Google and Microsoft have their own suite of really good tooling. So, you know, some of them are like probably some of the best ones to look out for. I'm sorry, and MIT has awesome, the UI is a bit funky, but has really awesome training. So you just roll that out and then put your wrappers on it as a business. So I think that's just the simplicity. The other mistake I made is I am all about structured problem and critical thinking. And if we look at the World Economic Forums, probably everyone's seen that 2x2 and everyone's like, yay, creativity and critical thinking are the 2030 skills. And yet even I forgot to put that into the curriculum, and nearly every single VP of people I talk to, because now I'm just full-time AI adoption with SaaS companies, so passionate about it. Nearly everyone is forgetting that in their budgets for AI because they're just like, oh, folks are going to get on the tools. And what I saw over time and what I'm talking to heads of people and founders about is the atrophy of intelligence, the atrophy of critical thinking. So we're not teaching people how to think with these tools. And I'll never forget a quote someone said back in the day at Atlassian, which was, a fool with a tool is still a fool, but we've made them faster and more dangerous. And I think we can all say that we've been foolish with tools. We've all been a little bit lazy and haphazard. So I think that's one piece on just tooling and training. But back to that piece around trust, I think that's why that people readiness survey is so critical, because for us, the key trust was around, I don't want to get stupider. People didn't want their critical thinking to be blunted in that org, and energy usage, because it was an energy company. I recently talked to another VP of people at a deep tech AI company, and when they asked their people, they were floored that the biggest resistance and lack of trust was that people didn't trust AI, and they worked at an AI company. And so
Wow.
I think without knowing, it's not like a brushstroke question because each org will have different patterns. It's understanding the psychographics and the demographics of your org, and then building the right approach and more, I'll keep saying, the intentional approach.
That was fantastic. I hope everybody was jotting some of those things down. I do have a follow-up question for you, Vanessa, and anyone else. How are you thinking about introducing back, into the system critical thinking? Because, I think we're reading a lot about that, and we've all seen that, these are the majors that are going to go away, and this is what you really need to be assessing. It's not the AI usage of your employees. It's how they kind of connect the pieces of the machines together. So anyone have any suggestions on what they're doing to pump that back in?
I can maybe just flick off and then from Alison and Jim. For me, when I was in my team, so this is how critical thinking has many definitions. For me, 3 core components are structured problem solving, critical analysis once you have an output, and then critical readiness and decision making. All 3 things humans are quite poor at doing, even pre-AI. So for me, when I was with my team, I had a rule. Before you touch the tool, you must do a structured problem solving. And I taught them a simple framework, SCQA, situation, complication, question, answer. 5 minutes, jot that down, then work with the AI. You get output 1, then you need to critically analyze it. I teach them tools. And then once you get, then you keep reworking that output. And then the critical readiness, because a lot of research is showing that people just get AI to do it. And you say, what was in that paper report? And no one remembers. So for me, it was that critical readiness and then decision making as well. But my scariest piece is they were outsourcing decision making to those tools.
Mm-hmm.
it's not about human in the loop even, it's thinking. And humans are deeply flawed at decision making. So how is the tool going to be better given what it's built on? So I think for me, it's those three components. And that's what I'm encouraging orgs now to do is you don't have to solve the whole ocean. It's kind of also what Alison said, is putting those guardrails in place of how to use it with the governance, but it's actually training people on skills we didn't really get taught at school. Some of us might have got taught at university, and we certainly don't teach them in business. So let's start teaching them and use some of our AI budget for the thinking as well.
Love that.
I would say a couple of thoughts around how to encourage people to practice their creativity and critical skills. One is, and I think even before AI was a hot topic, I'm sure we all have partnered with teams, and as our HR generalists are growing and they're trying to become business partners or moving into subject matter expertise, we'll get an email or we'll sit down and have a one-on-one, and they'll say, I gathered all the information and this is the situation. What do I do? And any leader's job is to say, that is great. What is your recommendation? Walk me through the considerations. Let's walk through a couple of options, and I trust you and I'll have your back. And so I think it's very similar with AI, not just taking all the information. It's how are we actually applying it and doing something with it. And one of the coolest things I've seen are some companies that are practicing hackathons, and they're practicing hackathons with non-technical functions. And they're giving people the opportunity to bring a lot of different problems to the table. And let's look at how non-technical people can be in a safe space and practice playing with these tools and actually solving a problem. And then that's in the workplace. But then I think probably the easiest and safest way to practice the critical thinking is to take any AI tool and play around with it with something in your personal life. Mm-hmm. Whether it is I want to use 11 Labs and create an audio book, whether it's I want to use Whisper and start doing more voice to text, find what is interesting for you. I want to build a website. I want to get into creative design. I want to write a book. I want to make a math game for my kids. Whatever that extracurricular hobby could be, start practicing in that safe space, because you don't have to show it to anybody. But once you start practicing on your own time, and start feeling more comfortable, then you can bring those skills into the workplace.
That's great. Something that I've done within my team is we started off when we were learning AI or sharing our learnings, we would share a personal update on, which trip did we plan? And now we've shifted to use AI for something that doesn't have a real time sensitive deadline, right? If you've got a really big project and it's due in 3 days and it needs to be accurate and correct, that may not be the thing that you want to mess around with. But if there's something that's been on that to-do list that is really kind of gnarly and you can pick away at it, it might teach you a little bit better. Because I think there's this pressure of, oh, we have to do AI on everything or it's all equal. It's not. It's just really getting into the habit. Jim, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we're a fully remote asynchronous company, and long form writing is our predominant form of communication. And that requires a great deal of critical thinking and that capability there. And what's really interesting is that crossover with the content generated by AI, and the folks that are leaping straight into the AI to take over that long form writing and producing the slop, which then doesn't make it through the business lens, regardless of what the problem is that they're trying to solve. So it's become an interesting pattern of behavior where people are still doing their due diligence in that long form writing, then using AI to polish and to advance that. So we're ending up with a better output there, but it's all based on that critical thinking that drove the long form writing, whether it's a business proposal to change the company's strategy or whether it's a proposal to use a particular piece of AI technology. That long form writing comes into play first and breeds that capability in critical thinking across the business.
Wonderful. I would slightly shift topics here to talk a little bit about manager enablement. And I think we kind of touched a little bit around how managers can stay aligned to the work that's being done. But what kind of training or support do you think will help managers guide their teams confidently? Because I think one of the things that we're seeing is it's coming from the most senior people. We're really pressuring our individual contributors to use it, but there may be this layer in the middle that is feeling a little bit lost. Any thoughts on how we can best support or train them to be in line with the company direction and also feel empowered to use it?
I think first and foremost, you've got to have the company direction piece. And I don't necessarily think this is a training issue. I think it's the alignment of the functions. I'll give you an example. In a hypergrowth SaaS company, if your sales function have got an advanced adoption of AI technology that's helping them create more with less, i.e. they're selling far more because they've removed the administrative burden of the function, it's quite possible that your customer success team doesn't have that same access to tooling in order to have the same level of success. But your business has probably been constructed based on some kind of ratio of, if this number of people in sales, then this number of people in customer success. But of course, you're not increasing the volume of salespeople, but you're increasing the volume of sales thanks to the technology. So you run the risk of reputational damage caused by overselling because you haven't got the balance right. So storytelling of situations like that enable the leaders at the ground level to bring that innovation up in a parallel to the company driving the adoption of different platforms and systems and their AI features, to then create parity, but to build new reporting cadences and muscle to make sure that you don't run into these kind of business conflicts caused by potential success. Then you can start to drive the training in the adoption and the success and the sharing of the knowledge and so on. But the company has to get that strategy right first.
That's great.
I think maybe cascading from Jim, yeah, absolutely. You got to have at that executive level in lockstep. And then I would really suggest co-designing to a level with the next level down, similar to what Jim's saying, because once again, you want to know what their resistance is, because if you think about people as a product model, then you think about managers as customer delivery. It's not the executives delivering it. It's not HR. The most important role, in my opinion, in an organization are managers. They are like in that messy middle. So if you don't really have them, I've been in so many organizations, and sometimes myself when I was a middle manager, you smile and you say yes, and you go back to your team and there's a different story. So if you don't have them on board, like truly on board, and listen to their warts and all story, then no chance. So I think there's a real piece there of understanding the why, understanding the metrics. And then I think the main training is change leadership. I think it was Accenture that I saw that is part of their sort of global, I don't agree with everything that they're doing, but one of the things is every single leader for the first time in that company's history has to go through change leadership and change management training, because we know like it's such an old stat from John Cotter, like 75% of transformations fail. I think in the AI space, it's up to 90%. So people are running around doing tooling. Yes, we need critical thinking, but just basic change leadership, like communicating the vision. I've been in so many orgs where I've been with CEOs or executives and they're like, yeah, but we told them that. I was like, okay, you told them that once, maybe twice, maybe at all hands. You have to say it again and again and again in multiple communications channels. And when you feel like you're blue in the face, some people have probably heard it for the first time. So I think that change leadership in communication, but that adaptive space, especially with AI, if anyone's following some of the tooling, it's changing weekly. So if your leaders don't have that adaptability in their communications and how they scaffold people's emotions and fear, and then the direction they give on the guardrails of what to do and not to do, I think that's the main piece. And something I did in my last company, and actually also when I was at Miro, was trying to embed like weekly managerial ops training. So not like a whole hurrah, just like 30 minutes to an hour where you just spin up a quick training. It's so easy to do these days with the tools as well, around what good looks like, and get them peer learning and sharing. That is where training has a return on investment, is peer learning with each other. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I think simplicity, co-design with your managers, change leadership is a must, and then peer learning will scale it more than you can as an executive.
That was fantastic. It actually kind of leads into my next question a little bit. So I'd be curious to hear from Jim or Allison on this one, because I think Vanessa did sort of share how can organizations keep human connections and engagement strong, right, through her manager example. But what are you all seeing as we're sort of leaning further into being, you know, heads down, doing this work? How are you kind of bringing people together to keep the communication and engagement strong?
To tie the last question and this question together, the most succinct framework I've heard for how to help managers along this journey are addressing the clarity gap, the confidence gap, and the equity gap. The first one around the clarity gap of, I don't even know what I'm allowed to use AI for. I think that goes to some of your initial questions, Janelle, around partnering with your CISO and understanding what's even allowed at the company. But the second and third ones are how we can bring that human connection together. So the second gap is that confidence gap of, I'm not even quite sure how to explain this to my team and share examples. So I think to Vanessa's point, having peer-to-peer training and manager sessions where they can share how their teams are adapting, where they're having struggles, where they're having wins, and also being able to ask some of those silly questions to their peers is huge and builds confidence at the manager level. And then the last gap, the equity gap, which is, when I say equity, it's more like managers saying AI is starting to make some of my team members feel invisible or they're not feeling as important. I think one way where you can address that and bring the humans together is weaving certain components into your rewards and recognition model. And maybe it is around who used AI and had some phenomenal return on investments and saved money, but you also can reward and recognize those skill sets. This person, Janelle used this and Janelle had incredible resilience. Janelle used this and demonstrated her critical thinking and did not just throw this in and just copy and paste out of ChatGPT. So there can be other ways that you're recognizing people that are demonstrating those human skill sets and those collaborative skill sets. So people can still keep working on those other things that you want them to focus on, not just the pure technical skill sets.
Great. My next question, kind of slightly shifting gears here, let's talk about metrics, because I know that, it's one thing for us to start dabbling in this and it feels like it's lightweight and fun and very exploratory. And then before you know it, it's a performance measure or cost per ROI per all of these different things. And so from this group, what simple board-ready metrics can HR leaders track to see if AI is helping, not hurting company culture, productivity, output, etc.?
I think one of the things that I've learned, and hat tip to Luke Eaton, who posts a lot from a RecOps perspective on LinkedIn. Follow Luke if you don't already. He talked about Parkinson's law of productivity, which is a very old model coming back into play. And that's that work will fill the time available for it. If you think about that from an AI perspective, we're deploying AI to save the human's time. It's that time that in how it is repurposed that's critical. And if the humans in your organizations are repurposing that time to do work that historically they didn't have time for, i.e. it was low priority, you're not getting an ROI. A critical piece of implementation is ring fencing that time before you deploy the technology, identifying where that time should be saved, what your hypothesis is for that, and then what you're going to do with it in advance. I mentioned earlier, it could be the removal of future open headcount to keep the team small because they're now doing the work that those future hires should do. But it might also be repurposing individuals from the organization to do more interesting and compelling work because they've been the early adopters of this and created that time space for the whole organization. So almost working in units of 40 hours per, every time we say 40 hours, we can repurpose someone onto these things. That then starts to create the construct for the metrics you can take further to the board of, this work has enabled us to repurpose this number of individuals, rather than talking about, we think we've saved 2 hours of time per person across this time period, but we don't know what they're doing with those 2 hours. That's the key piece there.
I love that.
Yeah, Jim, I love that too. A couple of other metrics beyond just the business and productivity metrics. I think the ones that are most interesting are these workforce stability ones, which I think Jim just hit on. Some of the metrics I've seen people talking about, but I don't think we have enough time under our belt to actually see year over year metrics are like internal mobility. So what % of employees are moving into AI augmented roles?
Oh, interesting.
Another one is role redesign. So what sort of roles or what percentage of your workforce roles have had their job descriptions updated and they have reskilling plans on how to make them more efficient or using AI. And then the last one around workforce stability is on manager readiness. What percentage of your managers are AI literate and they're moving along with the change communication for AI.
Fantastic. Thank
Well,
you.
I had one more
Go ahead.
thing. I think
do.
for me is go and talk to your board. Like everyone wants board ready metrics, and I think we should be thinking beyond perhaps what our board wants, but so many people start running towards stuff. And any person who is a CHRO on this call or on this panel knows something you present to the board and you're like, yeah, they didn't actually really care about that slide. And I spent a week on that. Brilliant. Great use of time. So I think it's chat to your board around what are you expecting from us, from AI? What's happening in your other portcos? It's lucky where for one of our VCs, they're like, well, you come and present to the other portcos as the portfolio companies. And so then we got to have a roundtable. So I think there's a piece of peer learning for us there as well with our VCs before we run and just do metrics. And then I think the metrics that you use, we've kind of talked so far about some of the best practices that we've seen elsewhere or used ourselves, but the level of maturity of the metrics you use and what you roll out will depend on the size and AI adoption. So what Claude's using for metrics is going to be very different from a company who's Series A or B that's just started their journey. And my strong opinion is before there's any productivity or ARR or time saved is if you're in the early stage, irrespective of size, you don't shove any metrics in the first 6 months and you give people to do what we talked about, playing. But then there's a clear roadmap for the org. Once we've had that time of like serious play, we are going to start putting some of these metrics in place, because I think the conflicting message we give is like, hey, everyone play, and then boom, it's in your performance review. Sure. And we're going to measure these parts as well. So I think there has to be a bit of a, dare I say, a maturity curve for your organization and intentional around what you're going to drop when, and then what you're going to measure off the back of that when, and then have that two-way conversation with your board.
Fantastic. So we've spoken a little bit about the board ready metrics. The kind of follow-up to this question is, what are some early indicators or signs that would show AI adoption is improving or harming the employee experience? And maybe they're some of the same metrics, or maybe they're different ones, but curious what this group thinks.
I can use an example of our own product in action with my team. So Ashby is an ATS with multi-threaded AI functionality through it. I'm getting higher productivity per resource, more hires per recruiter, thanks to the technology. But what's really interesting is my team are finding they're able to spend more time with candidates.
That's great.
Thanks to the AI. And that's a big part of the job satisfaction element from my organization, for the recruiters and other folks in the team. So that's a really nice balance of ways of recognizing the impact. Yes, we get the business output, but we also get more enjoyment of the day-to-day work thanks to the administrative burden diminishing.
That's great. Well, we had a live question that we received, so I wanted to ask this one of the group. And if there's any more questions in this group has, please drop them in the chat, because otherwise I think this might be our last one, because I think it's kind of a meaty one. So as AI adoption scales across the organization, what is the single most effective action or actions an HR leader can take to protect the company culture and to see adoption of AI? Give it to the people. Tell them, what should they go do?
There were two components. It was double barrage. Can you just repeat those so I can write it down? So it was the single important action.
Yes. Yes. What is the single most effective action HR leaders can do to protect company culture and also see AI adoption in harmony?
I'll share one, just from sentiment I've been hearing with peers and friends and neighbors. I think that there's a feeling that some companies are hiding behind AI for their RIFs. Oh, we laid people off because of AI. And I think people, at the end of the day, if you want good culture, you need to be honest and you need to be trustworthy. So you can just say, we overhired, or we did not have a good workforce plan. But people want to understand the why, and they want it to be an honest, truthworthy answer. And I think what will help that level of trust is not having these reactive riffs and reorgs after a bad quarter after quarter, but to actually see a multi-year plan. I've heard some companies say, we're going to reskill our FedEx, we're going to reskill our whole organization of tens of thousands of people by 2030. Or some certain banks have said, we will be reducing our workforce by 10%, but it's going to be happening over the next 3 to 4 years. And so I think when people feel like there is time, there's going to be thought put into this, and it's not going to be a reactive riff that they're going to hide behind an AI headline, that's what helps with culture and trust.
Couldn't agree more.
I think to riff off of that, excuse the pun, that wasn't intended. We do, the level of depth we go into the business strategy around headcount planning and so on is pretty extreme for most companies. And there is this fear within your workforce of AI replacing me, replacing my job. The level of transparency that you can go into of, we took this into consideration when we were building the headcount plan. This is what it looks like moving forward. Potentially addressing the changes to the Pareto curve. You've got the 80-20 model that's always existed for companies. That's not going to be the case in the future. Companies are going to be much smaller than the historical benchmarks for a company of the same size, same revenue, and so on. So it's recognizing that that is the change that we expect over time. How are we building in the elements of technology today, technology tomorrow, and the expectations of impact into our strategy? And then how are we going to empower and facilitate the change in you, the existing workforce who we value so much, to be a part of that future, much smaller company? That's the way that the culture and the change and the innovation can sit well together, through deep transparency.
And my one thing is, I'll just go back to what I said at the start: conduct a change readiness survey and pulses. You can take a lot of actions, but you need to understand the psychographics and the demographics of your org and what matters to them most in culture. Is it the rituals, routines? Is it the stories? Is it the org structure? Is it the power dynamics? Is it the control systems? What are you designing for in culture? Culture is, I like the culture web, those kind of 6 elements. So before you go and take an action, the only action is understand what's most important to your workforce. Don't assume.
Wonderful. Well, I am just so appreciative of this group sharing so many wonderful tidbits here. I'm going to go back and share our screen as we wrap up, but just tremendous thanks to our panelists, Vanessa, Jim, and Allison. I know I learned a tremendous amount from each of you, and I'm really excited to put some of these things into practice, and appreciated all of the folks who joined us today. If you're around next month, we will be doing another episode 19, talking about AI teammates. I think we kind of teased a lot of that out, but how can we build our organizations for a new operating model for work? And then in May, we will have another episode around future ready leaders. How can you build the AI leadership bench, which should definitely be good ones. And as always, thank you to our GoProfiles sponsors. They've got some really amazing products that will actually help track a lot of the things that we talked about: AI employment engagement, AI information discovery, enterprise search. And they're just a really wonderful resource for those of you who may be looking for ways to make some of this easier. But without further ado, thank you again to everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you all so much. Bye.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks. Bye.